Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Sheldon, advisor at the Ministry of Defence here in Abu Dhabi. Actually, I beg your pardon, I got that wrong. I'm actually Dr. Michael Simpson. According to this name tag here, I'm a younger, more handsome version of Dr. Michael Simpson. I'm not sure where the new nameplates are for this panel, but since I know them all, I'm happy to introduce them, at least briefly, for the purposes of our audience here. So, starting from my immediate left, we have Ahmed Ali Al-Shamsi, who is from Thuraya. And then after him, we have Tariq Al-Awadhi from the UAE Telecommunications Regulatory Authority. And then we have Riyadh Adely from Skystream. After that, we have Mitsuhiro Sakamoto from the International Telecommunications Union. And then we have Steve Doiron from Yahsat. And last but not least, we have Tom Freeman of Kymeta, who is also our gracious sponsor of this session as well. And just on behalf of the panel, I'd like to thank the Global Space Congress, as well as the UAE Space Agency, for putting this session together. And hopefully we will cover a lot of good ground here. As well as being the advisor to the Ministry of Defence, I am the founder, publisher of Spacewatch Middle East, which is covering this event. And so please be sure to check out Spacewatch Middle East at your leisure. So, we're talking about a sector, an industry sector in the space community that is undergoing tremendous change and transition right now. And hopefully this panel is going to bring some light and cast some light onto that and enlighten us all about where we're headed and where we want to be. So it's going through transition, not just in terms of changing technology, in terms of the development of high throughput satellites, for example, but also in terms of the markets it's serving. So we have things like, for example, the Internet of Things. We have the increased use in video. So for example, it's not just aviation and maritime connectivity where you can watch a movie. It's also, you know, you can binge watch Mr. Robot on your device here, instead of actually on your home television and so on. And of course, this brings about greater demands for capacity and so forth. Within the Internet of Things, this covers a multitude of areas, so it's not just IoT in a broad sense, it's also things like smart infrastructure. When you think about, for example, the Chinese One Belt, One Road initiative, as well as Japanese, Indian, and other countries' initiatives throughout Eurasia for increasing infrastructure and connectivity, there is a role for satellite communications industry, obviously. Also, the advent of driverless cars, an issue that we will be touching upon here, is also going to be a very important matter in this regard. And then on top of that, we also have basically a scarce resource in terms of bandwidth. And there are ways we can actually unlock more bandwidth and spectrum in this sector, but it becomes a much more difficult challenge, not just technically, but also politically and geopolitically. So hopefully we will cover that as well. And last but not least, of course, you know, there's more than one way to provide connectivity, space being one of them. The other one, of course, we have a very powerful and very large terrestrial telecommunications industry, 5G, for example, and fiber optic cabling, submarine cabling, all these kind of things that are also affecting the industry. So that's the context in which we find ourselves, and I'm now going to turn to our panel, and I'm going to start off by asking each one of you about how you see what those challenges and opportunities are, both from the perspective of your company and organization, but also as professionals in the industry, how you see things developing and where you think we should be heading. And Ahmed, I'd start with you.
Sure. Thank you, John. I don't know if I call you John or Simpson, so based on your name, but so I think the industry, the satellite industry, evolved over time, and I think there is a lot of momentum to change different aspect of the industry. People talking about more LEOs now, small satellite, try to change that industry. But I think it's if we go back again one step and look at how this evolved. I think we have two fundamental issues here. One is, I think we started with the telecom in the 70s as, you know, moving together, and maybe in the early 20s, we somehow diverted because of the GSM. And I think his more focus was on the terrestrial side in that area, while in the satellite left to be focused on a small area, which is, you know, specific to the satellite. I think that is one issue. And the second issue is, I think the way how we look at the satellite industry internally is not optimized in how we should be. Looking at the technology, I think we should be able to focus in bringing those together and then get the benefit of what is happening in the terrestrial as well in the satellite and see how we benefit from that. I think you mentioned the IoT is one element, which I think the satellite will play a big role in this. A connected car is another thing. I think mobility, and we in Thuraya, maybe we are the only company who continue to attach to the terrestrial. We have a good relation with the GSM operators. We have roaming agreements with them that help us to benefit from what's happening in the terrestrial area. But I think in the same time, we need the whole industry to support that. We need the whole industry to push the satellite to be used in the in a day-to-day, is not when needed. Also, we need it to be looked at as a service that user need to have all the time. And I think that cannot be done by one company. I think that need to be done by different organizations, need to be done by administration, need to be done by the ITU. I think in the GSM world, I think they are more organized in terms of how they push that technology and not to understand that wrongly here is we are all a customer of a terrestrial network, but at the same time I think we need to have the benefit of both satellite and terrestrial in a way that is we both satellite industry and terrestrial benefit from that, and the users use those in a way that is seamlessly, is not seen that to be as a two separate network or two separate ecosystem and product and so on.
In promoting the industry, as you just mentioned, I mean, do you see that as a policy problem, or is it a marketing problem, or is it both?
I think we have, from our industry, I think, we look at ourselves as a competitor to, looking at each organization as a competitor to another organization, while the big competitor is not within our area, is more or less is outside that. So I think we all need to work towards an ecosystem. Example of that is, satellite manufacturer or satellite supplier or even product supplier. I think they look at certain area of that ecosystem. I think they need to focus more on the system. And that is what is happening in the GSM. And the GSM or the terrestrial is, those suppliers knows exactly what's happening in the market. They know exactly how what is required in the terminal side. They know exactly what's happening in the system. We don't do that in the satellite. We are a little bit focused in certain area, and we are not augmented, in a way that we support that full ecosystem in the satellite industry. And the second thing is I don't think we put ourselves in a way that we advertise ourselves to the terrestrial network to say satellite is a key component to the communication that is needed by individuals, and we've seen that in the Thuraya. And certain, disaster that happened is man-made or it's a natural, where the satellite is needed. I mean, there is no way to avoid, that or to ignore that. I mean, people need the services over satellite for connectivity. They need it for data and throughput. It's military or, NGOs or maritime or in the aero. So it is a fundamental requirement for the end users. But we didn't put ourselves in a way that in front of the GSM operator, which actually is everybody is focusing on now, to say that we can do something with you. Mm-hmm. That I think is missing. I think we need to do more work to push that, rather than being a competitor in a spectrum or in a market, okay, where we can collaborate.
Tom, from Kymeta's perspective, how do you see things developing, and how would you address Ahmed's charge that we're not getting ahead of the terrestrial competitor?
Pardon me. I was sort of expecting you to go this direction instead of that direction.
I'm going to hop backwards and forwards just to keep everybody on their toes.
I know, just brilliant, absolutely. So we at Kymeta kind of represent the consumer electronic migration of space, if you will. So we are creating a consumer electronics product. You can call it the Internet of Things. You can call it whatever you want to, but these are going into automobiles, and tens of millions of them are being planned. And for lots of very, very sound business reasons, the automobile companies need to be able to do this kind of, have this kind of communication. Capacity, coverage, security, cost, these are all things that the satellite industry completely blows away the terrestrial systems on. And I'm speaking as an automobile guy, I'm not speaking as a satellite guy. And that, if I could just step back for a second and maybe give people context about what we're doing that's different. And that is that everyone's familiar with big old dishes that sit on the top of houses and apartment buildings, and they get direct to TV, and they're marvelous. They get 10, 20, 100 channels, HD channels into the house. But they can't move, is their big problem, right? And then, at least in the United States, Sirius XM has the shark fins on the back of cars, has satellite connectivity, but it's 128 kilobits. That's all you got. What we bring that's new and different is that the power of those dishes are now flat, thin, and conformal, embedded into the roof of the cars. What does that mean? And this is my way of answering Ahmed's question. A year ago, that gentleman sitting right there and I had just finished this project called Trip Across America, and that we just put all this into a Toyota automobile in Seattle. It was Super Bowl Sunday, our highest holy day. Nothing happens on Super Bowl Sunday. I didn't have the heart to ask my engineers to drive on Super Bowl Sunday, so Dave and I drove as being the executives in the company. And we got on Interstate 5 and we headed down from Seattle, which is in the upper north, left-hand corner of the country, down to San Francisco. And we're bemoaning the fact we can't get the Super Bowl. And I went, hold on, we have the internet. So we went to cbssports.com and we started streaming the internet into the car, driving down Interstate 5, having a great time. We got to Portland, Oregon, and I said, I wonder if Skype would work. There we go. We turn on Skype, and I'm Skyping my fiance back in Seattle. We're going, dang, this works pretty well. This is kind of cool. Drive a little bit further, Medford, Oregon. And David turns to me and he says, have you ever watched House of Cards? It's this political thriller about Washington, D.C., and it's on Netflix. I said, no, I never have. And so we said, well, let's do it. And so all the way through Oregon and Northern California, where there is no cell coverage, it does not exist on Interstate 5. We're watching it, and we're having a great time. We get down into Oregon, and there's this little device from Amazon called the Echo. And that we say, I wonder if that will work. We connect it up, and that it's a voice-driven system, and we say, where is there a good restaurant in Weed, California? How high is Mount Shasta? How many people live in California? Long explanation. But what that's meant to say is that there will be a huge number and variety of communication systems into automobiles, that what satellite brings to the party is opening up this massive world that did not exist before. When our friends from Nagoya came to visit, we worked very closely with the Japanese. When they came to visit, they said, take me to a place, Tom-san. Take me to a place, Tom-san, where there is no data coverage near Seattle. How far do I have to drive? It's 14 miles outside of Seattle and you are out of coverage. So that is the kind of opportunity that we bring, and that's going to mean that there is, from a security point of view, as Ahmed said, in terms of emergency point of view, from a integration with the terrestrial systems point of view, that we have a very bright future with satellite. That was too long, and I got preachy.
No,
and I
not at all.
apologize.
That actually helps set the technological context, if you will. Riyadh, if I can ask you, we were talking earlier, and you were talking about how there are a lot of major market changes, which Tom has alluded to, as has Ahmed, but maybe you could perhaps go into some more detail for us about how from a Skystream regional satellite communication provider to various sectors, defense, oil and gas, and other sectors, how it's changing for you, and you know, not just from a company perspective, but also as a satellite professional, how do you see things panning out right now? What is this new context we're facing in the region?
Yeah, thanks, John. Well, it's not a secret today. The industry is not in its best shape. You know, we had better days in the past, and there are some people saying that we have reached the commodity phase of the industry, and there is nothing wrong with that because this is the natural evolution for most of the industries if we have the scale in the market. But unfortunately, these days we don't have that. We had witnessed a tremendous growth in the supply in the last years, and this is due to we had witnessed many launches in the satellite in the last 7 to 8 years. Now the satellite themselves, they are different. They are very efficient, and they carry much bigger loads than the past. And also the technology has positioned the industry in a better shape when it comes to bits per hertz conversion ratio. Now all of these are good things, but it has positioned the industry with a huge amount of data or access of capacity to the market. And unfortunately, the market did not grow proportionally with the same, let's say, rhythm of the supply. And this is also due to two things, major things, which is not a secret. Number one is that we haven't grown in number of application. We're still talking about the same application that we're talking since last 10, 12 years. And also, we are also focusing, we are a bit lazy, I can say. We are still focusing on the same market segments. Right. And we're talking about, we brand them differently, but it's at the end of the day, it's the same application, it's the same market. So that has caused, you know, a little bit of uncomfortable situation for the industry. But I believe this is going to be a very short term because today, this situation can change, and I think there are some efforts. One of them is Kymeta. They are coming with some brilliant application, and there are many others in the industry as well. And also, I believe that as an industryman, we should involve different or a new game player to the formula, which is the market. It's not you know a rocket science to tell that we don't know any potential application available today in the globe. But if we introduce ourselves to the market and we involve the market to be a game, you know, player, I think they're going to be a game changer. And we can do that by sending simple, consistent messages instead of intimidating the market by telling we are a satellite. We talk about frequency, we talk about, you know, orbital slot, we talk about specification. At the end of the day, we are nothing except an IP pipe provider. And we have our own cons and we have our pros. And I believe if we successfully do that, the market will impress us with a tremendous amount of application we have never thought of. You know, instead of we're talking about the same market segment, the same application, the market, they know better their challenges and they will help us to position ourselves in those market segments. So I believe that the future is bright. The future is not bad, but a little bit of more effort from us, it can help. And what is happening in our industry is not unique. You know, let's look at a similar sister industry, which is the GSM operator or the IT industry. They reached the same position that we are today, where they have a huge infrastructure, but they cannot grow their revenues, and their EBITDAs and the numbers is going down. But there are companies, smart companies, who are sitting on the top. They did not invest a penny in those massive infrastructure, and they make tremendous amount of money. such as Google, such as WhatsApp, and others. And I believe smart people in our industry, they're gonna come, they're gonna use this massive, efficient, brilliant infrastructure that the industry had, and will have a great success stories in our industry. Thank you.
Is there a danger, though, that, well, I personally agree with you, but isn't there the danger, though, that in bringing those smart people, if you will, to the boil, to the top, you perhaps disrupt the industry too much in the sense that, you know, established companies will disappear? That's not necessarily a bad thing in the broad sense, but you can imagine how that would have a major economic repercussion regionally and nationally as well. I mean, how does the industry not manage that disruption, but how does it encourage it while at the same time making sure it benefits from it rather than being like the dinosaur that's wiped out and made extinct?
I believe everything will evolve. I believe you cannot stop innovation. You know, it's the same as the challenge that our friend and the regulator are facing. It's difficult to challenge technologies and innovation. And we always react to those challenges. So vice versa, I believe every challenge is positive. Every challenge will help us to evolve. Every challenge will help us to position ourselves in much better situation than we are. So I think whatever gonna happen to the industry is gonna happen in a positive way.
Okay, thank you. Steve Doiron, earlier we were talking about, for example, that the distinction between mobile and fixed satellite services is something that's blurring or even disappearing. And I wonder if you could also help the audience understand why that's the case.
Sure, absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. So, from the perspective of ESOA, what we're looking at is offering
Sorry, Steve,
services.
can you explain what ESOA is?
Oh, I'm sorry. So it's the EMEA Satellite Operators Association, which is a trade association. You have to appreciate, we're now converging to a place where in what used to be fixed satellite bands, we're now seeing mobility. The key to us is really broadband. How do you deploy broadband? And in certain applications, you can put it on terminals where the satellites are close together, which used to be called fixed satellite service bands, and you have mobile satellite service bands where the satellites are far apart, and those technology applications are there. But you will see, and you are seeing it now, mobility applications in the FSS, on aircraft, on ship, on trains, in cars, in a variety of different media. So the separation between the two is no longer one of mobility versus fixed as much as satellites which are far apart versus satellites which are close together. And how do we apportion, how do we make those technologies work together?
Thank you. And Tariq, from a TRA, from a policymaker's perspective, having heard your colleagues here talk about how they see things developing, what challenges and opportunities does this present from a policymaking perspective? Does this make the job at TRA harder, or is this something that's making your job easier, or none of the above? Is there something that, are you detecting trends that perhaps we're not seeing?
Well, thank you very much, John, and good afternoon, everybody, again. As you aware that the TRA is regulating the ICT sector in the UAE, and also regulating the radio frequency spectrum for all kind of services, satellite, space, terrestrial. And I've been just hearing about, from our colleagues here, a number of issues related to the satellite business, against also the terrestrial convergence, and there are some challenges. Of course, the TRA facing these kind of challenges day by day, and because the technology is changing and evolving very, very fast, and especially in the wireless area. In the last 10 years, I can say that the technologies in the wireless areas being changed dramatically, and especially in the terrestrial services, which their network, it's become very advanced, new technologies, IP, smart, and it becomes that they are requiring a lot of spectrum. So most of those technologies requiring spectrum, so sometimes in order to find those kind of spectrum, and government in each is different from country to country, also they would like to improve their network, improve the services. Let's talk about a little bit here in the UAE that our leaders, when declared a few years ago that they need all their services, government services, to be available on the mobile. It's not easy. You need to change your network, you need to change your services, you need to provide also spectrum so that these kind of mobile services be available for the customer. And when we come that for the TRA looking for this, what kind of spectrum to be available, then we have different services. We have satellite, we have broadcasting, we have some others. Okay, which one that the network or services that common in the UAE are or interested, or let's say the other word is not being that popular right now. We have some services in some sector. It's not become popular that now because the other services become more. So we go and study and to see how the spectrum can be used. Of course, the UAE is similar to other countries. It's not the only working together alone. It has to work with the neighboring countries. So we are working with neighboring countries. We are working in bigger level also as Arab group and under ITU. So whenever that WRC is coming, there are set of agenda, number of frequency being identified as candidate for those services. And when we see those spectrum, it becomes very challenging for us because now every community, satellite, space, terrestrial, broadcasting, they want spectrum. The TRA has to work with all of them in order to see and fulfill their requirement and also not to have cause problem to others. And this is also what we did right now. We have created one national team. So this national team consists of all stakeholders, that mean operator, telecom operator, satellite operator, broadcasting, vendors, suppliers, all, and some government entities, working together as one team under TRA umbrella, TRA leading that one in order to see our future with regard to spectrum. And WRC 2019 is coming in 2 years. We have big challenge there in order to see which frequency that can be identified for new technologies for satellite and space. We have around 14 agenda out of 25 in WRC 2019, all talking about space service, satellite and space. Of course, there are one important agenda, which always we call it 1.13. That is for IMT 2020. And they have big list of candidates bands. Most of it share with satellite. And we have to decide as either as UAE or as regulator on all over the world, which spectrum that we allocated for IMT 2020. And we have to allocate, to be honest, because technology is coming. If we will say that we will not, we'll try to delay it more, we will not be able. Because there are some countries in the world trying to use spectrum, which is not within the list of ITU bands. And some countries, they would like to start from now. Frankly speaking, UAE, one of them, that they already have a team working for 5G or IMT 2020. And we have now some candidate bands we need to share with others, which were the bands that can be used right now for 5G before 2019. Because we have some obligation now or some projects, big projects in the country from different operators. They would like to start with the 5G before 2020 or 2021. So these kind of challenges, we are working on it. We are seeing day by day in the TRA, trying to find good policy, good regulation in order to either to bring this kind of technology here or we stop the technology in the UAE.
Okay. I detect a certain maybe a potential tension though, when you talked about IMT 2020 and so on, and then based on what Riyadh said earlier about how the industry is, not only lazy, but in some cases is beginning to understand these, if you will, underserved markets, something we'll get into in a bit. How do you interface with industry to make sure that you're either on the same page or that policy does not lag behind the market or the market doesn't get ahead of policy? How does that work both here in the UAE but also from your knowledge on a more regional basis? Are there opportunities for industry and TRA to talk on a regular basis, to understand each other's needs and requirements and so on?
See, as mentioned that we have a national team. And this national team is comprised of TRA, Telecom Operator, Salat Dual, Thuraya, Yahsat, Space Agency, the supplier and vendors who's behind this technology, who's working on that one. This is one. Second, we are following up also with all different organizations such as ITU, 3GPP, or GSM Association, also with the ESOA, through the Yahsat also, looking their interest. Broadcasting, by the way, is one of the biggest community also. We have to be careful about them because most of their bands being taken away, because right now terrestrial broadcasting, either in the UAE or many countries in the world, is not becoming that popular. I have to be frank.
Okay.
In UAE, we stopped analog TV in 2013. Started digital TV, just a small area in UAE, but still it's not popular that much because satellite broadcasting, it is more popular here in the UAE. So, but we are following up with them with those all, and we are taking their views. There are consultation also, time to time we do. For example, recently we have updated our national spectrum plan last year. And updating the national spectrum plan, taking care of all the result of WRC and also from comment from different, through the consultation process that we are doing.
Okay, thanks. And last but not least, Sakamoto-san from the International Telecommunications Union. ITU obviously deals with this not just at a regional basis, but on a global basis. And the trends we're talking about here in the Middle East are also happening across the world. Can you provide us perhaps an overview of what the ITU does in this regard, its role, and how you see things developing in the next few years?
Thank you, John. The ITU I'm working for more than 20 years is an international organization, and it is a sole organization, international organization dealing with ICT industries. And we are also not only the radio frequency management, but also standardizations or telecommunication and so on. And I'm working for the radio communications bureaus, which are dealing with the spectrum management, terrestrial and also the space, and spectrum management or spectrum associated, orbital allocations associated with spectrums. And as Tariq said, that we are making regulations in allocations of this frequency to the services, and that will be happening in the radio conference, WRC, which Tariq talking about. The 19th is the future ones, and 15 is the most recent ones. And why we are doing this is we need the regulations, the satellite industry and all the services which using the frequency need rules in order to not interfere with each other. And that is the purpose why we are making rules, and we are making some frequency to assign to certain services, not to interfere with other services. That is the whole purpose of the ITU. And ITU, we are 193 members within ourselves, and 700 sector members also working together. So we are providing forums to discuss with each other and find the solutions to have not to, service allocated and not without interference. So that is the whole purpose we are doing. And of course, we notice that there are the emerging needs for the satellites and also the satellites needs to the mobilities. And we have an example of the WRC 15, which is happening 2 years ago. We have the needs, satellite community needs to have the mobility in the platforms, mobile platform, like trains or the cars or the ships. But they wanted to use this for fixed satellite bands. And there are certain limitations to use this fixed satellite band for those particular moving objects. And that is reason. That is because these moving objects can interfere with the terrestrial services of other countries. If, for example, those platforms on the ships goes to close to the coast of the terrestrial service which are operating in the other country, then they will cause interference. That's why we need rules, and we need to understand with each other or the administrations and make rules for that. And with those making rules, we can introduce the new services. If everybody understands this service is important, and okay, let's make a not interference, make each other. We have some arrangements. or if it's interference occurs, there are the operations to stop those interference. Those are the make it into regulations, put into the regulation. Then we can manage the interference while introducing new services. So that is the framework we are making to establish. So I know that there are emerging services coming, and we are welcome. And let's try to make rules which is those services can be flourished. At the same time, we don't cause interference and we don't damage to the existing services. That's what I wanted to have. IT wanted to aim for. Thank you.
Thank you, Sakamoto-san. Ahmed, I want to follow up on something that Riyadh said again. I mean, I'm fascinated by this notion that the industry is, if you will, stuck in a rut in terms of its traditional markets and it's not doing enough to find new markets. Is that a proposition you agree with? And if so, how would you from Thuraya address that, or are you addressing it?
Yeah, I think when you mentioned those dinosaurs, you said, or this big, company like Google and others, I don't think we need to bring those in the satellite. I think we need to bring the young people who's actually the dynamo behind all that market in the satellite industry to see how we can evolve that. That is, I think, is the important part. There should be some application that is for the day-to-day where the users or those young people will be attached to that required to be done over the satellite. It's not in the terrestrial, more efficient to that, to be used this way. Can be for areas, it's not in the cities, but one of the example is the connected car my friend talked about here. But we need to as well take that forward with the GSM. And I think 5G is a good example of that. I think in the terrestrial area, they didn't yet define what the 5G, struggle with that. There is even competition between themselves. I think if we miss that opportunity, we don't put the satellite part in that new standard or that new technology, I think we'll not be able to be successful in a long term. I think we need to look at that carefully and see how we can tap to that. Second thing is actually what I see personally, the driver behind using those spectrum in the terrestrial is more or less is driven by the technology, which actually is coming from the suppliers of the networks. So I think we need to use our colleagues who's in the industry and the technical and technology side to as well promote that satellite and come up with a solution that is attractive for those young users for those services. I think we need to present it correctly to the terrestrial world and have that satellite combined with the terrestrial. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have a such sleeve product. We try to even encourage people to use like social media over satellite. We were successful to do that. But again, as one company cannot do that, we need different people to push that. And coming from the ITU or coming from terrestrial, and think that once that is there, it's going to work by itself. I think there is a lot of potential in this market, but need to be presented in the right way to the right people. I think that is what is maybe missing, and I think we need to do collectively a lot of work to push that. So that's my thing.
Are you talking about, for example, like a national or regional satellite industry association type thing, or are you talking about being more creative in the strategic partnerships that you do to advance these products?
One of the things that is the previous panel we're talking about standardization. I think is standardization today in the terrestrial is easy to move from one network to another network. So it's the supply chain is easy. Different companies produce the same product for different operators. In the satellite, you do everything. As an operator, you pay for the whole capex of satellite, network, product, and everything. So it's really very costly. So it's an issue for you to have a service that can be attractive to the end user compared to terrestrial. So I think we need to change that, but we change it in a way that today there is roaming happening between networks of the terrestrial. I think we should have some standardization that allow us to have, or to allow the customer to roam between satellite networks seamlessly, and then we all benefit from that users when he's moved from one area to another area. I think that is a big change, but it needs to be done at some time. I think once we pass 2020, as my colleagues mentioned here, terrestrial is moving very fast, and I think we need to change the dynamic in the satellite as well to be able to catch that. I mean, we have done several things in this Thuraya, try to tap to that, and I think it shows that it's good and successful, and people is happy about it. But we need to see that as more of a standard pushed by the industry and by the administration and different countries to say, well, we need the satellite to be part of the whole ecosystem, terrestrial and satellite as a service needed for the end users. And then I think that competition of other areas will go down. And the market will be open for everybody, and I think we will be able to, augment a system that is work for all.
Thank you. Steve, can I ask you to put your Yahsat hat on and talk about, again, Yahsat, for example, we note with interest that Yahsat's making big inroads with broadband in Africa and places like that. Where else is Yahsat looking at in terms of maybe what may be described as underserved markets and things like that? And do you agree again with Riyadh's assessment that the industry in general is not necessarily doing enough to find new markets?
Right. So in terms of Yahsat, without trying to plug too hard, sound like I'm one-sided because I'm part of ESOA too with multiple members, we're looking after to provide broadband service in areas where we think are the most underserved. So one of our core markets is definitely Africa. We certainly look across the Middle East, and we're also looking at, with our new satellite, coverage of Brazil. But the important part in all this is broadband, 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 broadband. And where is satellite effective? And to me, satellite is effective if you look at it cleanly. There are many areas where satellite is a good, cost-effective solution. In mobility applications, to aircraft, to ships, in rural areas where the population densities are lower, it just doesn't make sense to have deep terrestrial deployments where you have logistic issues. How do you backhaul those signals? How do you do all these other things? Broadband to the home in underserved areas, rural areas, those are the key markets we're after. But if I can follow up on some of the discussions that took place, there's conversation about 5G. And let me give you some context here. If you're going to offer broadband by satellite, what's the key foundation for that? It's spectrum. You need the spectrum to do the job. You need the foundations under the house. And that's the challenge, is getting the spectrum. When you're in the satellite industry, you're covering many countries from the same satellites, which means you have to have spectrum, which is pretty much similarly assigned across all these countries where you want to serve. In terms of the ITU and many of the studies that you're seeing, you have spectrum, which is in the books, which is the same spectrum assignments through these different countries. What do the 5G operators, what do the IMT guys want in terms of spectrum? They want the same handset to be able to deploy it across the world. So when they're looking for spectrum for IMT, for 5G, whose spectrum is the most attractive? Ours. And we're the first target. We have the first bullseye on us. Why? They don't make spectrum anymore. If you're going to give spectrum to 5G, you're going to have to take it away from somebody. If you take it away from the satellite industry, you're impacting the ability to deploy broadband. We've seen for the last 15-year challenges in C-band, where we've lost spectrum there. And I don't know how many key applications are served there which are now being challenged. We have L-band. We have our MSS operators who are challenged there. Ka-band, which we fought at WRC 15. And by the way, we were largely successful in there as an industry. Why? Simple. We managed to approach many developing countries, like in Africa, and say, have you seen 3G and 4G yet in your country? No. Okay, so what do you think the odds are of getting 5G? Not good. Okay, well, you want to give up your satellite spectrum where we're launching satellites and going to offer broadband. That's for sure. The spacecraft is being built for this. They supported us. So we were able to keep parts of Ka-band off these studies for 5G. The next challenge we have ahead of us at the next WRC is a number of bands which are going to be up for review. And let me say that the next band, if spectrum is the underpinning of it, is the VQ band, 50/40. Satellite industry takes 10, 15 years to build the infrastructure. the space-qualified hardware to use these bands. So I'm looking to Tariq here. You know, we have our spacecraft manufacturers who've been diligently working to produce this hardware. It's now available. Yahsat and other companies are looking to have VQ band on their next satellites. It's an awesome band. You can do some really small terminals on airplanes. I'd love to have C-band on an airplane, but the problem is the pilot gets upset when there's a 1.8 meter dish on top of the aircraft. It just doesn't work. So you need a small dish that gives you, you know, a good performance, that throughput, and that you can still work in satellites that are close together. VQ band needs to be protected. So between now and 2019, we're going to be looking at protecting those bands. That's the challenge, protecting those bands. And your voices are important because Tariq's got a hard job. He's got many children. You know, he's a father with many children, each one of them wanting something. The satellite is one of those children, and we have to convince him to make sure that VQ band, we have an opportunity at it. So it looks good for satellite, but the key again is spectrum and protecting that spectrum, what we have and what we need for the future.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I'm going to ask Tariq in a minute what he thinks about his satellite child, whether it's ugly or actually has a future. But before I go, I want to put both Tom and Riyadh on the spot, if you will. Tom, I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot yet again, when I. But again, it gets to Riyadh's point about these, if you will, new markets that we need to be looking at. What are these new markets? I mean, let's get specific here.
Ahmed said something really interesting, and we completely endorse this notion. How many people here have ever been on the M40? I'm sure a lot of you have. And if you've ever driven north by northwest out of London, heading toward Birmingham, you drop terrestrial all the time. And you can't make a phone call consistent there for the life of you. Now, this is not throwing a stone at the United Kingdom or throwing a stone at the infrastructure there, because that's actually true all over the developed countries. And what one of the huge opportunities we have is a seamless switch between satellite and terrestrial. My consumers don't care. I mean, they don't care how those bits get into the car. They just want the bits, if it's Wi-Fi, if it's satellite, they just want it to happen and they want it to work. You have to defend the spectrum. We have a seat at the table, and I think it's the most important seat at the table as far as the automobile people are concerned, but we have to have that. The second thought that people have touched on, I like going after Ahmed because he sets me up perfectly for these things, is innovation. Everyone talks about innovation here. You hear a lot of talk about it. I'd like to tell a story about how we just created a product. That guy right there, right here. We were in Washington, D.C. after we did this trip across America I spoke of. Arrive in Washington, D.C. We're kids from Seattle. We don't get to Washington, D.C. very often. We get there, and there is nothing but a jillion black Suburbans. You are nobody in Washington, D.C. unless you have a driver who drives you in a black Suburban. And that we have this system in the 4Runner from Toyota, and that it was designed for maritime. It's too big for a car, it's too deep for a car, it has all the rack mount electronics that you would find on a maritime system. And I'm scratching my head and I go, why couldn't we put these things into those black Suburbans? Those people need secure transmission, they need huge pipes, they need to have the ability to have situational awareness where they have cameras in front, cameras in back so they know where the bad guys are. And so Dave looks at me and I look at Dave and he says, well, you know, I could make it lighter, I could make it thinner, I could shrink the electronics, and we could put together a package where this would all work. So, I mean, that is innovation in the satellite industry, where we say, here's a system that was designed for maritime. It's designed to withstand hail. It's designed so that you have a heating system in it because it has to go to the Arctic. And we go, well, you know, we don't need those things if we're talking about a Suburban because they already heat themselves. They have their own inboard system. So to summarize sort of the two thoughts is that I see a future where there is multiple paths in and out of the automobile, and that, you know, kind of the way that innovation happens in this silly business is you take an application that you thought was brilliant for one area and you go, that would work really, really well if we just made it quicker, faster, smarter for this other area. Sorry,
No, not at all. And you raised also a very good point about innovation, which has become one of these meaningless buzzwords these days that
Big buzzword.
completely divorced from reality about how innovation actually takes place and why.
Because it's two guys standing on a sidewalk going, geez, there's a lot of black Suburbans here. I wonder if they'd like secured communication. Turns out government people like that a lot.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Riyadh,
You're asking me what is the...
what are these markets we should be looking at?
If I know, I would make $1 billion today. All right, but let me tell you about one thing. And after that, I would like to follow up about what my colleague in Yahsat said. I believe till today, even with a brilliant product and applications such as Kymeta, I have a huge respect to your product and to the idea. We're still talking within the same domain. We're not going away from the comfort zone that we're talking about. And that is a problem. And we're still living in our denial stage. Okay, we need to go into the 4 stages, and we should accept that the market today we're servicing is not enough to what we have. And I believe this is happening. This is happening, loud and clear. But we are not yet there. But also, I'd like also to follow with what my colleague in Yahsat says. We, as a satellite industry, we're weak in lobbying our rights. And that is very understandable, because at the end of the day, think about it. You have a GSM terrestrial network who is paying royalty and license fees, billions and billions of dollars. They share their revenue in terms of taxation and others. They offer employment, and they contribute positively to the market. It's not only about money, but it's also, this is one element. And we, coming as a satellite industry, our market is smaller, our application is smaller, and we think we will have the same lobbying power than the terrestrial have. I don't think we have that yet. And I believe this is not going to be for a long time. Because if you witness, I've been lucky to live in this industry for the last 12 years. And I've witnessed, the price when it was at the peak top, and today we are going down to the bottom. But with that, we are not yet competitive. Okay, and there is a huge market that there are some initiatives today. One of them is started with Wild Blue, and today it's Hughes. We have Yahsat, and we have others, where they try to, tap the consumer market. But we're not yet competitive. We're still more expensive than the terrestrial, in place. But that, I believe, but I'm sure that's not going to continue for long, because if you look at the rhythm of the price drop and the efficiency in the industry is going to that level where at a point of time we will become very competitive and we will have position in that market. And once we have access to that market, and considering we're still not in denial, considering our cons and pros and what the application require, and the cost of the last mile between the satellite and the terrestrial, we will position solidly and firmly as a serious player in that market domain. And once we reach that point, I think we're going to go back. People will think that they will take us seriously, and I believe that will be the first step to have a stronger lobbying power where we can protect our frequency right.
That's a very interesting point. Steve?
If I can follow up. I've had the honor, pleasure, pain, scars of being in the trade associations that have been defending that spectrum for the last 15 years. And while I'll agree that the satellite industry is much smaller than the terrestrial one, I would like to think we've certainly been effective in making sure we're protected. We've made it very clear to the regulators what are the key services that satellites carry, and they've been receptive to that. I mean, has it been 100% successful? No, there are parts of C-band and other bands which, you have to share with the neighbors, and those have happened. And that discussion keeps on going. So I would say we've been surprisingly effective. We punch well above our weight. And the 28 gigahertz, managing not to have it as studies for the 2019 WRC, I think is a tremendous win, for which we also have to look and thank the support we've received from many regulators, such as Tariq here, in that process. So that's one point. The other point I wanted to touch on is that we shouldn't look at competing with terrestrial services, especially the wired side, on a head-to-head where they're the strongest. Of course, they're going to have, I think, a more cost-effective solution on a bit-per-bit basis in urban areas where they can deploy wired solutions. But I think we have our market where we hold firm. If you look at rural areas, underserved areas, the cost of deploying that infrastructure there is prohibitive. And we're geographically independent. So yes, there are places where they're most cost effective, and then there are places where we're more cost effective. And I think you have to keep that in mind. It's really an apples to apples comparison you have to make. If you go to those rural areas, no, it doesn't make sense to trench in, half a kilometer worth of fiber just for one customer at the end of that line. It makes more sense to have a satellite solution. Now, the challenge to make that happen, and the obstacle we often face, is to make sure we get fair treatment. You're facing universal service funds, which tend to sponsor the incumbent terrestrial operator. You have, regulatory rules, a variety of other rules, which don't provide a level playing field. But I think if we get a fair chance, we're a pretty good offering. We do good things in the markets where that play to our strength.
Okay, that's a good point. And just as you're casting light on this issue, the light, of course, above you has blown out. But Tariq, apparently you're the father of many children, and I'm sure you love them all equally. But if you were to give one piece of advice to the satellite industry about how it can not just protect its frequency, but also maybe even expand it, what would it be if you're able to give it?
Well, I've been hearing this one, and I was trying to see what words that I have to select it, because whatever that I am going to say it is maybe it will be for the other side, or maybe thinking that I'm the other side. Let's ask this question before. Why many countries favor of terrestrial over satellite? Especially, I'm talking a spectrum. Spectrum. If we know that one, then we will know why in the kind of ITU or others that people going through satellite for spectrum find more. The answer is very simple. Terrestrial services or network is belong to the own country. Satellite, it's belong to another country. Or regional, maybe, if there will be some regional satellite. So many countries, I know our satellite operator, I know Yahsat, for example, which we are working with them together, and Thuraya, how they are struggling to get service license in different countries. It's not easy. It's not easy because they have so many requirements, and you have to fulfill that requirement and then to provide services there and to move. So terrestrial, no, it's belong to their own country, their network, their services. So for that reason, people when going to that area, they try to see which spectrum they are not using it in their own country. They can agree to be given to terrestrial services. This is what's happening in WRC. You see those many countries when coming there. I'm, for example, chairing the Arab group. UAE has all different kind of technologies. They have terrestrial, they have satellite, broadcast, and ever. But many Arab countries don't have satellite. So sometimes I had challenges also within the Arab group to convince them also to protect satellite, because they said, okay, we don't have interest for satellite. No interest for satellite, we don't have satellite. And we need to enhance our network. We need some new spectrum to expand our network, to use new technologies, 3G or 4G or 5G. Now, for that reason, many countries in the world, you see that going towards terrestrial, trying to find more spectrum. And when they will find which spectrum they are not using it, in their perspective, they are not looking for satellite. They are looking for their perspective. That many satellite spectrum, they are not using it. So for that reason, they are trying to use it. UAE, for example, in 2012, we were not part of C-band. to be used for terrestrial. We were disagree to that one. In 2007, UAE also was not agreeing to use the UHF band, 800. But in 2012, UAE introduced new spectrum 700 and entered to 800. In 2015, UAE also entered to C band from 3.4 to 3.6 only. The reason because the government interest hasn't changed, and they want to use those spectrum which is not being used that much in the country for the new technologies. So advice for the satellite operator, also the terrestrial, they have to look how to improve their services from using different, whatever mean there, coordination has to be made there. Some policies or regulation, for example, UAE, they have satellite and they have mobile. But wherever that our air station for satellite will be there, we'll protect it around that area only, but not other than that.
So we can paraphrase Lenin. You may not be interested in satellite spectrum, but satellite spectrum is interested in you. But Sakamoto-san, I wanted to give you the last word because you're from an outside, if you will, organization of the region, but one that's interested obviously in what's going on. So if we can ask you to maybe give some concluding ITU thoughts on what we've just discussed.
Okay, thank you very much. ITU, of course, satellite is a very nice child. Also, the terrestrial also nice, very child. So we wanted to raise both very healthily and so on. So I dragged the solution that hybrid things, which seamless transmissions from mobile to satellite, from urban areas to rural area. Those kind of system which is developed internationally, then the interference problem is solved. And also the different demand in different regions and different areas can be resolved. So this kind of technology, which is developed internationally framework, that will be very useful. That's what I think. And advice I can give to the satellite industry to protect their own frequency is just to use it and then prove the importance of that use. So QV band, which are now many people, new services are looking at, I think satellite operators, they should use fast. That is my advice to give. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As someone who used to teach space policy, to students who are more enamored with the idea of putting humans on Mars and the moon, which is all great stuff, I'm not doubting that for 1 minute. Whether it's in SATCOM itself, whether it's Earth observation, whether it's actual planetary science and exploration, you can't do it without considering the spectrum aspect to it. And yet spectrum, if you will, is like as someone who's worked for the military and works for the military, it's a bit like logistics. Most people find it rather dry and boring, and certainly spectrum for a lot of people is, but you can't do what we do without it. So it's something that more and more people should pay attention to, even if it may be something that seems incomprehensible from the outside. With that thought, we are now in the situation where the mosquito of time is colliding with the windshield of fate, and we must draw this session to a close. I would like to thank our excellent panelists for their thoughts and insights onto this very important topic, and also thank you to the audience, as well as also to our sponsors and organizers for being here. Thank you very much.